We've done a lot of rigging videos over the years, from Yamahas to Mercury DTS to Mercury Analog, and since Mercury has now changed their stuff, I don't know, 4 years ago or so, we are going to talk about Mercury's next gen DTS rigging and how it functions. To understand this, we do need to recap on some other things, being that you need to understand how a CAN network works. And that is because everybody uses a CAN network, from NEMA 2000, Suzuki, Yamaha, Mercury. Everybody uses a CAN network, so you need to understand how that works before we can talk about the rest of the rigging and how it all goes together. Fly-by-wire is actually pretty easy because in a sense it's just plug and play. You plug the connectors in, they only fit one way, and that's basically the way it sets up. But when you start adding other things to it, like you start getting 2 engines, 3 engines, 4 engines, the expandability is where things kind of get complicated. And then whenever you have a failure of one of the components, if you don't understand how the rigging is working and how it is talking to itself, or like how each component is talking to each other, then that is going to make diagnostics very difficult. So that is why understanding how the system is working and why it is put together the way it's put together, that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start off by the CAN networks. Now, every CAN network on everything from NEMA 2000, which are these, to Mercury, Suzuki, Yamaha, they all have terminators on the end of it. Think about it as computers. So if you have a computer here and you have a computer here, these two computers are going to talk to each other, but they're going to use this right here being the network to make that conversation happen. And the network has to have boundaries, which is going to be these right here. These are terminators, and on the end of them, that tells where the end of that network is. So NEMA 2000 uses these right here. These are just little terminators on the end. They're 120 ohms. They put resistance on the line and basically tells this system that from here to here is one network. Mercury uses them just like these. They have these. They all have terminators on the network. So now let me draw out exactly how this network works. So NEMA 2000 is going to be the easiest to explain, and that is because you can see the different computers and the network. So terminators on the end. And each terminator is 120 ohms. So I don't know if you can really see that, but it says 120 on the end of that. See how it says 120? That is 120 ohms on the end of those terminators. And depending on the network will determine the kind of terminator. But you can have a computer or a device and another device. So basically each one of these devices can talk to anyone that's in here, but if you were to take this terminator, put it out here, this device is now outside of the network because this is our network. Nothing outside of that will communicate on this network, and that is important to understand because we're talking about networks, and this is one CAN network. It gets power from, it gets its own power that powers it up, but that is basically a CAN network and the simplest way to explain it. Now, let's talk about the issues with these networks and one of the reasons why Mercury changed their rigging. So Mercury uses 3 CAN networks for its boat system. CAN X is going to be for the engine and the helm. Doesn't matter if you have 1 helms, 2 helms, 3 helms, doesn't matter. CAN X is for the engine's shift and throttling. So for each engine, you have 1 CAN X network. So if you've got 4 engines, you have 4 CAN X networks because each engine is its individual component. Each helm has its own computer that talks to the engine on the computer, or the computer on the engine. So your engine and your helm both have a computer. The helm computer says, hey, I want you to shift and throttle, and that is done on the CAN X network. 1 CAN X for every engine that's on the boat. Then they have CAN P, which is the entire boat. So the entire boat has 1 network for everything else to communicate. If there is a problem on CAN X with, say, the port engine, then the port engine can use CAN P, the entire boat network, For it to communicate to control the engine, it will be in a Guardian mode, but if there is a problem with CAN X, you can still shift and throttle that engine, and the computers at the helm and the engine will use CAN P to talk to each other. And then there is CAN H, which is only for joystick, so we won't get into that, but those are the three networks that Mercury uses to communicate all of its digital throttle and shift components from the engine to the helms. CAN X is each engine, and then CAN P is the entire boat, and then CAN H is the joystick functioning of if you have that on your boat. So let me show you one of the main issues that there was with the old style of how they were using these networks and how it was ran, and how that differs from the new style and how the new stuff goes together. So this is the old way of how this was set up. You can see here you have Terminator for X at the engine, you have a Terminator here for CAN P and H, and then you have these two Terminators up here at the helm. And then if you wanted to add a second station, this 14 pin here that came from the engine would get this Y harness that would then go down here to the bottom, and this would go up to the upper. And then as you expanded this system, you would then start linking things together. So you would have a Terminator back here, Terminator here. This is the helm. You can see your helm computer and your computer on your engine. It would link over to this other engine and then go back here and terminate. So your network was constantly like going up, over, back. And as you expanded the network, it would come in, it would do the Y harness, one would go upstairs, one would go downstairs. You would take your Terminators from downstairs and you would move them upstairs, and that way the network would go to the farthest helm. So obviously, and then on top of that, not only that, but then it would turn into this whole harness here. So like all this, you got these Terminators, these weather caps, you got these plugs, the horn, these plugs here, your key switches, you got a plug here, you got a plug here, like these plugs here. Like this became very, very complicated, and there's one of these for every engine. So as you would continue to expand this network, it would continue to get more and more complicated, because now you've got a Terminator up here. Look, you've got 1, 2, and then a weather cap, 1, 1. You got this link harness here. So you would start up here at the helm, go back to the engine, link over to this engine, back up to this helm, link over to the other engine, and then back over here. So it could be this continuous snake that would then continue to get more and more complicated as you added stuff to it. So here's the triple engine. You can see the 14 pins comes up here. They do the Y harness downstairs, all got weather caps. Upstairs, you got your Terminators with the link harnesses between the engines, all your Terminators on the end, and the expandability would be exactly that. It would be sort of complicated. So you've got, here's your Terminator for your CAN X, one here, one there, one here, one there, one here, one there, one here, one there. So each engine, each helm computer had its own network for CAN X, you know all that. And then the whole boat network would do this looping, snaking momentum where you terminate it here at the farthest engine, come up, over, back, over, up, over, back, and then it would terminate. So as you would expand this network, it would get farther and farther and farther until you got to the point where you are right here and you have this massive amount of wiring going through the boat. These 14 pins are not small harnesses, and you've got Terminators on everything. You've got link harnesses on everything. You got 14 pins going upstairs, 14 pins going downstairs. This is a massive distance, and you would start to get voltage drops, which would put stress on the network. So as you can see, this is very, very complicated. It's not that complicated once you understand it, but just looking at it, it probably looks very complicated. So when we would transfer over to the new stuff being over here, this is much simpler. This is for a single engine, and you will see this a lot of times with Mercury. Mercury, please don't sue me. I'm just educating people on how your stuff works to keep your engines on the water. But the single engine, single helm, SESH, that's basically how they abbreviate everything. But you can see this is much more simpler. You have on your single engine, you're going to have the 3 Terminators up here, and then you're going to have one plug here going to the control box, because the CCMs are now built into the control boxes. So all the helm computers are there in the control box.
This blue connector is going to be your CAN-P, and your green connector is going to be starboard for a starboard engine. And it is, I mean, it's very simple. This plugs to the J-box, here's your key switch, here's your lanyard, and everything else is just already done on the harness. There is no connecting to anything. Whenever you go to a second station, though, it is pretty simple because the expandability, you just have a different harness for downstairs as you do upstairs. So upstairs, you're going to have this harness that has the terminators. They call it upper helm harness. And then they're going to have these connectors. So you got one harness that goes downstairs. That's the gauge harness. There's a link harness. And then there's this wake harness. But this is only for the single engine. As you go to dual, triple, quad, it gets a little bit simpler. But as you can see, it's way simpler than it was with all of the looping. So if we look at the dual engine, single helm, you can see all that changed from the other one was you added this gray plug here, or this brown plug. So CAN-P, starboard, port, easy peasy, still one lanyard. You added one key switch, and then it added a 14 pin, so that way that goes to the engine. You got X and H and X terminators. Very, very simple. Your triple engine, you've got a new gray plug for your center, which will then turn into your starboard inner when we go to the quad. But again, all we added was one key switch, one 14 pin. Look how much simpler this got compared to this, where you've got all this looping back and forth and all this nonsense. And if we compare the quad to the quad, again, you got 4 key switches, one lanyard, one plug to the J-box, and then 14 pin with an X, 14 pin X, X, XH. And then all you have are these plugs here that come right off the control box. So it's super, super simple because you don't have any of this action going on where you've got these link harnesses with the terminators, the weather caps, the link harnesses on the engine, and, you know, just a bunch of looping back and forth that is no longer needed. Instead, you just got 4 different plugs: starboard, port, starboard inner, port inner, and then your CAN-P, all on one harness. If we look at this for a dual station, you only have the harnesses going upstairs. So opposed to back here where you're looking at all of these, all this mess, and these are all 14 pins that go upstairs. So to go upstairs, you got all these 14 pins that are not small harnesses, compared to these where you've got one gauge harness, which is only 2 wires. The 14 pins, these have 14 wires in each one of those. And then you have a link harness for starboard, link harness for inner, which again, these are a lot smaller, link harness for port inner, and then link harness for port. So you did add one extra harness for the gauge, but again, this is a 2-pin wire. This is a 2-pin wire. These are not big harnesses compared to the other one, and they just have links. They click, go upstairs, and very simple. And then if you even wanted to add a third helm, which is something that's not uncommon, it literally just adds a center or middle harness that connects the two. So you've got all the same harnessing, like it's basically all the same harnessing except for the upper and the middle and the lower. So these are different harnesses because they have different wires. So like these link harnesses come up, they click here, and then they have the same wires that will do another link harness to go up to the third helm. So that way, if you've got, say, a bigger boat that's got a tower, you got a salon, and you got down in the cockpit area, you want controls in the tower. So when you're in the tower, you can control the boat. When it's raining, you want to be in the salon so you can drive in the salon. And then when you're docking it or you are out, fishing and you're in the back of the boat, you want controls to control the boat there too. So the triple helm is something that people do want to have, but this does make it way simpler than it used to be with all of this looping. But that's not the real thing here, because it's the voltage drop that you would see from going up and down all over the place. Whereas now at the back of the boat, it's going to be much more simpler. So here's your terminators on the engine. Terminators on the engine for your dual. Terminators on the engine for the dual. And then whenever we get to, say, the triple, your clean power now clicks into your 14 pin. So it just has this right here that goes to the battery, to your 14 pin that's a Y harness. And you will notice that you have a terminator on this port engine, and you have a terminator right here on the starboard inner engine or the center engine with one harness that clicks out to the other engine. So no more looping back and forth. This gray harness here in the middle has no CAN, P, or H in it. It is not a data harness as you would consider it to be. So the original quad, you are doing this looping. So data is running back and forth down each one of these 14 pins. So you're up, back, and it's just a big snake. Now it is going to go from the inner engine to this outside engine up to the helm, all the way over to the other outside engine, back here, and then back to the inside. So it's just one big circle running around the outside of the network, opposed to running back and forth on each one of these. You've basically eliminated half of the distance that the network needs to go, because you're not running data redundantly for no reason down the middle of the network. So that makes a massive difference in the expandability and the voltage drop issues that you would see. But that is pretty much it when it comes to the differences between the old system and the new system. It is just the way they are running them. It is virtually the same thing. It's just taking away a lot of plugs, a lot of wires, and a lot of redundant moving of data down wires that it really doesn't need to move down, because everything can be done in the computers at the helm and at the engines, which saves a lot of voltage drop. And that is basically how the new next gen DTS system works. It's way simpler once you get your head wrapped around it. I think it's way simpler than it used to be on the old DTS system, but you let me know any questions that you want to know about or anything else that you want covered outside of that. Let us know in the comments below.